I'm sure many of you, especially if you're mystery fans, know Martha Grimes' work. She's one of the nation's great mystery writers. Her most frequent protagonist, Richard Jury, the Scotland Yard detective, has won the devotion of millions of readers over the years. She's written a mystery, I believe, every year for more than 2 decades, 25, 23, 24, somewhere,
30 years.
30 years, stratospheric number. She won the Mystery Writers of America Grandmaster Award in 2012. If you look down the New York Times bestseller list, you will have noticed her name on it more than a few times. And she has a new title, The Way of All Fish, featuring another of her famous sleuths coming out early next year. I should also mention that she, I believe, didn't publish her first book until she was over 40. So if any of you are aspiring writers, it's never too late to start. Model of inspiration right here. Ken Grimes is not a writer by background, but you would actually not know this reading the book. We learned from Double Double that he was a passionate reader as a boy, and that perhaps explains why he has a way with words, a fluid writing style, and definitely an ability to tell a story. And theirs is a story, actually two. It's their individual and collective story of alcoholism and how they both, in their own ways, overcame their addictions. And let me just say on a personal note, what I found most compelling about this book, and I think that once you start it, you will have trouble putting it down, is that it's so remarkably honest and open. And I think this is really a trick of these types of books. It doesn't feel like a confessional. And what I mean by that is that it's revealing without being gratuitously so. Martha and Ken let us into their lives not to shock or to tantalize, but merely to share, and they do so with great humility and humanity. And we're just so happy to have you both here tonight, two local authors from our own backyard, which makes it even more special for us here at Politics and Prose. So please join me in welcoming Martha and Ken Grimes.
You know what might be more fun, Bob, is if I stand here and ask you some questions, or not. I'll come down here and ask you some questions. I could tell you don't want to do that. So I'll sit down here and maybe I'll ask you some questions, and you can ask me some questions, and we'll have the audience.
Is this mic on?
Yeah.
You have to talk right into it. The question usually arises as to why this book came about. And I can tell you exactly why. Because I figured in the event of a book signing, he could do all the work. Do you have anything to say?
My name's Kent, and I'm an alcoholic. Wrong room.
Well, I got this idea a long time ago. Incidentally, if you put those numbers together, I didn't publish my first book until I was 40, and I've been publishing books for 30 years. It doesn't take much to figure out. Actually, I've been publishing books for more than 30 years, but we won't go into exactly how long I've been publishing books. But I got this idea a long time ago, and about 10 or 11 years ago, as we say, or in Kent's preface, we were sitting in a coffee shop in Charlotte. Was that right? Charlottesville. And I said, I think we should write a book on alcoholism. This, of course, did not go over very well with Ken, excuse me. Yeah. The big anonymous, I can't blow his cover. Because he had never written anything, or at least he hadn't written a book before. I mean, I've written more books, but he has more friends. He's been doing this for some time now. I don't know anybody. I know Travis, his wife, my 2 grandsons. there's one right there. Isn't he handsome? He really is. He's one of the handsomest children I've ever seen in my life. I'm completely unbiased. I don't know where his brother is. They spread themselves out. Yeah, he's the cutest one I think I've ever seen. Cute and handsome are totally different. Okay. And I said, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, there has never been a book on addiction written by a parent and a child. I mean, the same book. There have been plenty of books written by parents on their children, and there have been some books written by children about their parents, but I think this is the only one where you have both the parent and child writing. And I thought that would be attractive to people. I mean, it covers so much. It covers all the parents with alcoholic children, the children with alcoholic parents. You know, indeed, whenever someone says to me, I read your book, I really liked it, that is always followed by an experience that either they have had, or a parent has had, or a friend has had. And I've said this isn't even 6 degrees of separation. I mean, it's as if everyone has had some kind of experience with this problem. And I thought that if the book was written from the point of view of both a child and a parent, someone young and someone younger, and given that Ken has used a 12-step program, and I'm not even allowed to say what that is, okay, for many decades, and I didn't particularly care for the 12-step program. There was just something, I mean, it's a really wonderful program if you can kind of relate to it, and I couldn't, that's just me. It really isn't the program, it's just me. I don't like large groups of people, except if I'm having a book signing. And then there can't be, seriously, there can't be too many if it's a book signing. I mean, to me, a dinner party is any number more than 4 people. Then it becomes a party. Until then, it's just a nice, intimate little gathering. So I thought that the 2 different points of view, oh yeah, I didn't tell you mine, although of course it's in the book. I went to a clinic in Silver Spring. This was an outpatient clinic. And it was, since I haven't had a drink for 23 years, which I can't believe, and if anyone has the time, there's a wine store right next door. Obviously, the clinic was extremely helpful. So that is sort of how the book came to be written. Ken, without the T, Ken, after a few years of thinking this over, decided that, yeah, he would take a stab at it. And I think he did. And believe me, the book would not have been published if I thought he was a bad writer. I think he did a very good job. Almost as good as I did. No, he really did. He did a very good job. I especially enjoyed the chapter where they all went fishing. I loved the end of that chapter. And I liked many chapters that he wrote, and I was really quite surprised that he was as good as he was. I mean, he's in PR, for heaven's sake.
Give me that microphone. All right, now it's my turn. Yeah, in PR, by the way, handling my mother's books. Yeah, so one of my many accounts, maybe my most difficult account as a PR guy. So I just want to say, for the people who showed up, the people that I know, thank you very, very much. It means a lot to me. And the people that I don't know, thank you very much as well. And my mother talked about writing this book. And so growing up with a writer and being a voracious reader, I hold writers in the highest regard out of all the arts. I mean, I like many painters, actors, musicians, but to me, writers are the sort of sine qua non. And I think one reason why is that the sacrifice that goes along with it, because it's such a solitary occupation. And growing up, I tried writing fiction. It is so hard. The fact that my mother has written 30 books of fiction, I just find staggering. It's extremely difficult. Writing about, how I got completely wasted and threw up on someone, that was pretty easy, actually. That came naturally, and I had this pen just poured. I didn't have a problem and then that happened. In fact, I had to cut a lot out. There could always be a sequel, double. I got enough material, believe me. But I guess the book, it was so I can't tell you how sort of happy I am to have been able to be a co-author with my mother. But the book came out of my own personal experience, and some people know me here professionally. Some people know me from my kids' school. Some people know me in other ways from a place I go downtown that I won't get into. But it may be a 12-step meeting, it may be not. But people know me, and people who really know me know that my recovery is the most important thing in my life. So one of the things that helped me get sober was a book. I was working in book publishing in New York, and there was a book that I was assigned. And some of these things, I'm not the type of person who says, there's some people who get very spiritual in the program, and they say, I was going to be late for the meeting, and then, there was a parking space, and God found me a parking space. And I don't really buy that. I do feel like there's a lot of coincidence in life and many things that are mysterious. But it is interesting to me that the publication date of this book was picked by an editor almost a year ago, and it was June 4th, which is my sobriety anniversary date, which seemed kind of interesting. So I just had 23 years of sobriety just a couple weeks ago. And I also found it interesting that I got into recovery from a book. I was working in book publishing, and my boss assigned me this book, Adult Children of Alcoholics, which was a relatively new concept at the time. And I was reading, I'm like, oh, that's why I'm so messed up. It's my mother's fault. Yes! I knew there was a reason, yes! Doesn't everyone want a finger point? It's like, it all goes back to Philip Larkin, right, Mom? They F you up, your parents, or your mom and dad. I won't say the real one. So, the finger pointing, I'm not responsible. Someone else is to blame. I'm a victim because these bad things happened to me. My parents got divorced, and they were drunks, and we moved around, and I went to all these different schools, and wow, that actually was pretty bleak. But wanting to take that and craft it into an excuse for why I didn't have to follow the rules. And that was a big thing for me. I didn't really like following rules. It's taken me a long, long time to realize life is easier if you follow at least most of the rules, if not all of them. And it was all about a self-justification and victimization and giving me a reason why I could stay up to 6 o'clock in the morning drinking every night as opposed to studying or opposed to doing whatever work or responsibilities I was supposed to do, or maybe even helping to pay for my college education instead of taking my mother's money and spending it in the bar or whatever it is. And so this book opened my eyes. So at first I was like, okay, so yeah, it's my parents' fault. Thank God. I always suspected it all along, but now I have a book that justifies that my behavior has nothing to do with my decision making. It's all because this was thrust upon me because of my crappy parents, right? So it was such a relief. But you know what? It didn't go far enough. So when I went to my employee assistance program manager, something that sounds pretty archaic maybe to some people now, there actually were corporations that actually had social services where they actually tried to help you. And so And this woman introduced me to a therapist who was a drug and alcohol specialist. And he's the one who kept on bugging me every week. What about your drinking? What about your drinking? I'm like, oh, this girl didn't call me back. My life is over. Oh, this person at work looked at me the wrong way and I can't take, all this drama. Never wanted to look at myself or my drinking. And so, when I finally went to a 12-step meeting, which I hated because I was an atheist, of course, just like my mother. And maybe not now, but you were then. And so, and then I'll hand the microphone over to my mother. But what I found when I went back was basically the people that I had been out there getting completely hammered with and being completely irresponsible, but none of us dealing with our lives or talking about what we were going through. Going back, I found these same people, but they were all sober and they were really nice. And they were very cool, and they were very funny. So I stopped drinking when I was 25. And for people who try to get sober, when they're on the younger side, it's not that easy because it seems as if our culture is designed for people of that age to go out and drink, and that's how they meet other people, and that's how they have fun, whether it's a barbecue, tailgating, a bar, whatever it is. So the fact that I could go out and have a summer beach house out on Long Island with my friends. And, we would stay up to 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. We just laugh and laugh and laugh. We make each other laugh. That I could have the fun that I always wanted, that sense of community and love and friendship and caring for each other that, I had initially thought I had found with these reprobates that I was hanging out with. And there was a sense of solidarity. When you're with people doing illegal things and doing them, a lot and flaunting it, there is a sense of us against them and a kind of solidarity that comes with that. But it's nothing compared to being with people that really care for each other and want to help each other. And that really is, I guess why I'm still sitting here and I still haven't had a drink in almost 23 years. And by the way, we'll talk for a little bit more, and then we'd like people to ask questions or, to open this up. We don't plan on sitting here talking at you for much longer.
Just to straighten out one point, among many, I am not, nor have I ever been, an atheist. I am the one who really believes God found me a parking place back there. He doesn't believe it. When we finished writing this book, I really was sort of appalled by the knowledge that here you have basically a 2-person family. When he says lousy parents, take that under advisement. There's certainly at least one lousy parent. But I really was sort of appalled that you have a 2-person family, and we didn't know the other person was an addict. He didn't know I was an alcoholic, although from some of the things he said, it sounds as if he did, but he didn't. And I didn't know that he was using all these drugs. Now, that's really, there's something awful about that. Of course, some of it can be explained by denial. And the rest of it, I don't know how to explain it. But that really sort of surprised me when I finally, realized that.
Yeah, I'll say one more word. So one of the things that I hope happens with this book, or just in general, is my mother and I did a radio show yesterday, and if you want a sense of high anxiety, try doing an hour-long call-in radio show, hiding in your office's closet where they have the telephone and computer system, and like whispering when people come by to get something out of the refrigerator. Trying to maintain my anonymity and not let my coworkers know what I'm doing. But we were on my mother and I were, I've listened to call-in shows. I've never been on a radio program. I've never personally called in, so I've never had someone call in and ask a question. But this woman was talking about talking about her brother and the fact that he had died an alcoholic death in January, and she was very upset, and she was basically crying on air. And I guess the thing that perplexes me and amazes me about people about addiction, and there's all kinds of addiction. Obviously, there's gambling, there's all kinds of things, food, but my particular addiction, alcohol, is that it lies to you and tells you that you don't have a disease or a problem. And clearly you do. And it tells you that the only thing, the one thing you can't do is to stop doing it, right? And it's the only thing you can hang on to. And that it affects so many people. They call it a family disease. So, if there's an alcoholic in a family, it's not only the alcoholic who's, going through a slow motion suicide or sort of circling the drain. He takes so many people with them, or she takes so many people with them. And so the effect it has, the ripple effect outwards, like throwing a stone into a pond, these concentric circles just go farther and farther out. And, it's a burden. It's hard. And, I sense from the little bit I've known from the reaction of people I've been reading this and people I've known in recovery, the one thing about it, though, is that you can recover from it, one day at a time. So it's like a self-inflicted sort of disease, psychological, physical thing that can be arrested if you choose to. But boy, is it hard to choose to, and it's next to impossible to get someone else to choose to do it too. That's the thing I think it's frustrating, and then I'd like to hear from you all. But I think the most difficult thing is if you get sober, as in learning that you can't force someone or get someone else to get sober sort of against their will, or no matter, it's like, well, I did it. Believe me, if I can do it, you can do it, because you should have seen me back in the day. And just knowing that it can happen, but having someone else choose not to make that choice and to get worse and worse is extremely difficult. So anyway, does anyone have any questions, or I'll start calling on you Harvard Law School style?
I'll start it. My my question is for Martha. I read a couple of your books, and were you, when you were writing, were you actually drunk or editing it? I mean, it's not that I got that impression. Does that explain? No, I'm just kidding.
You can't offend me.
Give me a chance.
Here's the thing about alcoholism, and possibly about any other drug addiction, but alcoholism in particular. You're never sober. And when I say you're never sober, I mean the effects are always there. Perhaps they're more when you're physically drinking, but the effects are always there. So the answer to that question is, yeah. Now, if you're asking, was I physically drinking when I was writing? No. The reason I wasn't was because I write in the morning, and I didn't drink in the morning. But the minute I stopped writing, no. You all have certainly read about writers like Hemingway, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and so forth. And a lot of writers were really slugging it down as they were writing. I wasn't. But it wasn't because I was a good little girl. It was just because I never wanted to drink in the morning. And incidentally, I might say that Ken's drinking and my drinking were two different kinds of drinking. Mine was what you call maintenance, where you drink pretty much the same amount around the same time period every day. His was, the impression that I get, his was much more a binge type of drinking. And, or he might have been a maintenance drinker and sort of embroidered it with binge drinking. But that is the thing about alcoholism. When I hear someone say, as I have over the years, someone say something like, well, I'm glad she's sober today, I just want to say, no, she isn't.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that, and then the next question here is that I think what my mother was talking about is something that some people might call the alcoholic personality, which is that you can stop drinking, but from where I stand, if you don't seek some form of spiritual solution, and that could be anything you choose, it doesn't have to be a traditional religion, but if you don't seek something outside of yourself, then there's going to be no inner peace, and it's the lack of inner peace and then the turmoil exerted by outside forces that has many people, drink again. So this whole idea of controlling, and being able to sort of, and a lot of our American culture in particular, I feel, and what I do for a living, frankly, is present people who are masters of the universe, captains of the ship, right? Very successful people who are able to bend the world to their will and be on the front pages of newspapers or magazines, and how, fantastic and terrific they are. And all that may or may not be true, depending on who I'm talking about and who I'm speaking to. But certainly my experience has been that it's that desire to control everything around me and force it to be the way I want it to be is one of the defining characteristics of the alcoholic personality, whether sober or drunk. So, the ability to accept people and situations and things in my life is being what they are, as opposed to resenting and getting angry and frustrated that they're not the way I want them to be. That to me is a source of so much of discontent. And there's got to be other ways outside of myself. And one of the ways I have found, and other people that I know who are sober in recovery, is by helping others. So helping others not to drink or whatever it might be.
I'll tell you, I think that there are probably numerous ways to stop, but I really think if one is an alcoholic, it is almost impossible to stop unless there is some group. And believe me, as I said before, I don't like groups, but there is some group. In the case of a 12-step program, there are always a whole bunch of people. In the case of the clinic, there was a circle of people. You sort of belong to one small group or another. But the reason I stopped was because, paradoxically, I couldn't stop. I didn't stop because it was interfering with my writing, because it wasn't. It wasn't interfering with my teaching. It wasn't interfering with the day-to-day routine. The interference, I guess, was it was interfering with my temperament. But because this group at the clinic said, well, if it wasn't interfering with anything, why did you stop? And I said, because I couldn't. I could not stop by myself. I would say to myself, well, I won't drink for a couple of days, 3 days, 4 days. And 24 hours later, I was drinking and rationalizing, what difference does it make whether I drink on Tuesday or Thursday? So I really think for a person to try and stop by himself is extremely difficult. I know one person who did manage this, and I'm thinking, was he really an alcoholic? I remember his being carried out the door feet first from one of the parties. So I thought, well, he certainly drank like one. He stopped all by himself. But that is very, very rare.
Yeah, I'd also like to point out that one of my mother's martinis was about the size of this cup. So we're talking about, 3-4 shots of vodka?
Well, the size doesn't make any difference.
Well, right. So two of these plus a couple glasses of wine. So when we talk maintenance, we're talking pretty heavy maintenance. I just want to clarify that. But again, I could never tell the difference between when she had 1, 2, or none. So,
I just wondered, since you were with your mother a great deal of the time before she admitted to being an alcoholic, before you became an alcoholic, and I just wondered what you noticed as a child. I had a father who was an alcoholic, and I did notice We would notice that as the martinis flowed in the evening, he became belligerent, hard to be around, difficult to have a relationship with. So if you're living alone and drinking, maybe it's not noticed. Were you aware, Martha, that you yourself were changing, or that your perception or the way people might see you, you were forgetful, you were rude, whatever? Because as a child, it was impressionable for me, and it made me think, I don't want to be
Well,
that
I was
person.
certainly aware of my ability to get very angry very quickly. However, I just assumed that, that was my temperament. And I didn't compare it with anything because I really had, if I thought back for a few decades, I still didn't have anything to compare it with really, because as I was before I was 20, and I talk about this in the book, my mother's business partner was an alcoholic. At the time, I didn't even realize she was an alcoholic, but I would drink with her, and that was before I was 20. And so, temperamentally, I just assumed that that was me. Now I don't really think it was. Now I can actually not get mad for at least 15 seconds, which is, the temptation to pick up the phone and call somebody and really chew them out. I don't necessarily have to do that anymore. That's a big difference.
So for me, I don't know what it was like for you growing up with your father, but I noticed there was a lot of emphasis put on the martini pitcher. So I was in college once, and I went to a friend of mine from college, Adam Dublin, last name Dublin. So he was Irish American, took me home to see his father, and his father's like, do you want some vodka? And I was like, all right, I'll have a screwdriver. I couldn't drink a martini. And so he went to the cabinet and he pulled out this little bottle, which I guess was a fifth. And I laughed and I said, that's how you drink vodka? My mother has the one with the handle built in. And she pours direct. I had like the idea of a little bottle of vodka was ludicrous. I'm like, who buys vodka in fifths? You buy it with the gallon with the handle, and you. So, and my uncle, who God rest his soul, isn't here right now. He and my mother would get together, and then you'd go over, and the martini pitcher would come out because the vodka was already chilled, and the ice cubes and the martinis. So there was a lot of sort of festive behavior around drinking. And it's, I don't want to make it too much like Rick Moody's The Ice Storm, but they were talking 70s, 60s, 70s, people drank hard liquor, and a lot of it in a very social setting. I think tastes have changed somewhat. People drink more wine now. It's a little less sort of, So I think it helps to have a sense of humor, about things in general in life, like Woody Allen, the life can be divided into two camps, the miserable and the horrible, So I think it helps to have a sense of humor, because to be able to laugh at myself, that's something I learned, with other friends in recovery. I guess, for me, when I'm challenged like that, I think of my higher power, whom I choose to call God, as I heard once. But I think about that a lot, and I try to think about what can I do to help somebody else. Basically the idea for me, Mike, is how can I take myself out of the equation? Because I feel so much better when my own ego isn't involved, And I think all the major religions, one of the messages is to be a slave to your ego is definitely the key to unhappiness.